Walking through my supermarket in late winter, I began to wonder about sweet potatoes. If I get a sweet potato and plant it, will it grow in my garden? And how much money can I save? Because when you buy sweet potato slips, they cost usually at least $2 each. That's $2 for each plant you're going to grow. Well, that's actually more than the cost of this sweet potato, and it should give me a lot more slips. Join me today as I show you what happens when I grow a supermarket sweet potato. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and it's been just over 7 months ago that I bought an organic sweet potato at my local supermarket to see if it would grow in my garden. And it did. Today is harvest day. Now, when you grow sweet potatoes in your garden, it's not as easy as just planting a seed. There are many more steps involved, which is why it often takes 7 months from the time you start until the day you harvest. I just had an overnight freeze, and the sweet potato plants are now dead. This is the ideal time to harvest. Up until this point, my plants have been looking great. They've been very successful, and I've been very happy with the results. In this long bed, I have 14 individual sweet potato plants. Now, a sweet potato is different than a regular potato like a russet. With those type of potatoes, you plant a whole potato or pieces of a potato in the ground. And from that, a plant will grow and you will get additional potatoes growing underground. It's those tubers growing on that underground stem which is what we harvest. When it comes to sweet potatoes, you can plant the sweet potato or pieces of sweet potato, and you're not going to get the same kind of results. Instead, what we do is plant slips. And it's those slips, those stems that grow from a sweet potato that we actually put into the ground. And that's how I began. I took my sweet potato and I buried it halfway into a tray of potting soil and then allowed the sweet potato to sprout those new stems. Those new stems are the slips that grow into plants. I removed those slips from the plant, and then I placed some in jars of water and I placed some into pots of soil. And that's why growing sweet potatoes takes so much time, because you have to allow for those slips to develop roots before you put them in your garden. If you live in a very warm area and you get lots of nice spring moisture, you can put them directly into the ground, but they can't handle any cold. For me, I was doing all of this in late winter and early spring, developing the roots on these slips. And then once they had enough roots and were showing new growth, by that point my weather was warm enough and I could put them out in my garden. I treated the sweet potato slips just like all the other transplants going into my garden in early summer, just like the peppers and the eggplants and the tomatoes. I put them into warm soil, mulched and watered well, and then just took care of the plants over the course of the growing season. And I was a little surprised here in my Colorado garden how well the sweet potatoes began growing. They took off right away, and they grew and grew and grew all through the summer until we've reached today, harvest day. Now, it's autumn in my garden. As I mentioned at the beginning, I've already had a couple freezing nights. The sweet potatoes are ready. Now let's see how big a harvest we get from a single sweet potato. It's best to harvest the sweet potatoes by hand. You can try to dig them up, but you're likely to slice through a lot of those underground sweet potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and get a hole started to make the process a little bit easier. But the bulk of my harvest is going to be by using my hands and digging through this soil. As I dig through this bed, I'm a little surprised by what I find. I am getting sweet potatoes, quite a few of them, but they're not as big as I had hoped. They're finger size, and the biggest one's maybe 5 inches long, but I did get sweet potatoes. This is actually the first time I've grown sweet potatoes. Colorado is not known as sweet potato country. We don't have the hot growing conditions and the long season that sweet potatoes like. And I would like to think that these sweet potatoes would have grown bigger if I had a longer season. But it could be the soil in my bed as well. My soil is relatively dense. This is a new bed. I have added some organic matter to it, but it's probably not as loose as these sweet potato plants would like to form bigger sweet potatoes. So I'm going to continue harvesting this bed, see if the results change as I move a little bit farther down the line, and see what the final results will be. As I finish up the harvest, I'm finding I have a lot of the sweet potatoes. There's more than 100, probably close to 200 in this bucket, but they are pretty small. Now I have gotten some big ones. These sweet potatoes are more of what I expected. While I didn't get the results I was hoping for, I did show myself that you can grow sweet potatoes using one that you just buy at the supermarket. As I put it all together and try to figure out why I've got so many small ones and so few big ones, I think it comes down to my soil. This is the very first year I've grown anything in this bed. The soil has only been amended once, and I had to use the trowel and the garden fork much more than I would have hoped for to loosen it up and dig out all of these wonderful sweet potatoes. If the soil was looser, if it wasn't so dense, I think I would have had a lot more that were this size. Now, one of the most important questions is, how do they taste? So let's go in and check that out. It's been 2 weeks since I harvested my sweet potatoes. If you eat them right away, they're not going to be that sweet. They need time for the starches that are in this root to convert to sugar. That's called curing. And in very warm areas with very high humidity, the sweet potatoes can cure in about a week. I'm not able to get the high humidity or the continual high temperatures, so I've allowed 2 weeks for my sweet potatoes to cure. And now I'm going to go ahead and roast it. I'm going to cut this sweet potato into cubes and then roast the cubes in my oven at about 425 degrees Fahrenheit. I tried to cut the pieces so they're all about the same size, and now I'm tossing them with some olive oil. I'm arranging the sweet potatoes so there's space between them so all sides will get the heat, and they're ready to go in the oven. Okay, the sweet potatoes have been in the oven for 30 minutes and they look really good. Let's go ahead and take one, and I'll let this cool off for just a second because it's piping hot. Now, I've noticed that these sweet potatoes that I harvested have more of a purple skin than the original sweet potato that I grew. I'm not sure if that's part of the curing process because these are still pretty young or not, but the inside does look the same, and that's important. I did purchase an organic sweet potato to begin with to grow those slips. Often, the big producers will spray their produce with a growth inhibitor. So the organic sweet potatoes shouldn't have that spray on it, which is why you can expect a slip. But if you just buy a regular non-organic sweet potato, there's no guarantee you're going to be able to grow it and get the slips. So let's see what the verdict is. Oh wow. I don't know why I'm surprised. It tastes just like a sweet potato. It's actually sweet. That's without any salt or pepper, so I'll put a little bit of salt and pepper on it. Try it again. That's really good. Cool it off. I'm sold. It's hot, but it's really good. Now, I didn't put my slips in the ground until the soil temperature measured 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what's recommended. And I think that's one reason why some of those roots weren't bigger, because I just didn't have a long enough season. I think I'm going to do this again next year following the same process, but I'm going to cover my beds with plastic so that I can warm up the soil beforehand and maybe get myself an extra 1 or 2 weeks for growing sweet potatoes, and I'll see if I can get them bigger next year. These are really good. You need to do this. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.